Now, if you can't pay it this month, you don't have to make payments that you don't have the money for. Does that make sense? Debt is lower risk to the investor, the person who gives you the money, because the amount you pay them is not dependent on the performance of the property. You can buy a deal and it can go completely sideways and you don't make any money. Guess what? According to the terms of your agreement, you still owe that investor 6, 7, 8, 10, 12%, whatever you agreed to. It's not, their return isn't based on the performance of the property. Everybody with me on that? Okay, so lowest risk to the investor at debt. Generally speaking, this is gonna be 8 to 12% interest rates. This will be variable. You might have access to cheap money where you're like, yeah, I can get private money at 7 or 8%. In that case, I want to see your phone so I can go through your contacts and figure out who that is. But generally speaking, 8 to 12% is a pretty good place to sit with this. It's going to depend, like, well, is it 8% or is it 12%, Mike? It's going to depend on the other terms. If someone is willing to give me money and I don't have to pay them until my deal's done in 12, 18, 24 months, well, I'll give them 24% because guess what? I don't have to make any payments. My cash flow is so much stronger, and or I can survive because the deal's not making cash flow, but I don't have to pay them until the end. So of course I want to give them a higher return. They said to me, well, Mike, I need payments, but I could take interest only. Cool. Maybe I could do 9 or 10% in that case, because interest only payments are less than principal and interest payments, of course. And then what if they said to me, well, Mike, I need principal and interest payments? Well, I could do that, but you know what? That's gonna really crunch my cash flow. The only way I could do that is if you accept 8%. Does that make sense? So as we change one term, just as Cody alluded to, other terms can change along with that. We're gonna go to the far end of the spectrum. See that really awesome nifty arrow that I had to pay somebody to create on my slide? Isn't that ridiculous? I'm so bad at these. That indicates that this is a spectrum. This is not 1, 2, and 3 buckets and all that exists. That's on the far end of the side. The debt side we just talked about is lowest risk to the investor, greatest risk to me as the owner of the property. On the far end of the spectrum, the equity side is the highest risk to the investor and potentially the lowest risk to me as the principal of the property, the owner. Does that make sense? Not if we're alive. Yeah, okay, good. So on this end of the spectrum is the equity. This is where you give up ownership in exchange for the money. Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with Ken Holmes. We talk about him a lot in the community. He's done this 50-50, and I put a question mark behind 50-50 because it doesn't have to be 50-50. It could be 40-60. It could be 60-40. It could be 70-30. It could be whatever the hell you want, as long as the investors are satisfied and your deal can afford. So the Ken Holmes model, though, the typical one he uses is 50-50. He raised ballpark $5.5 million since he came into our community about 3.5, maybe 4 years ago. Deployed all of that money, and his portfolio, he's since sold some of them, but if the total value of those $5.5 million of assets that he purchased is over $11 million now. And he bought all of that with no money out of his own pocket. The reason Ken loves that is because there's no risk to him. He has no money in the game. Now, his reputation, his credibility, his integrity are absolutely on the line. People that know Ken trust him. There are many people in this room that have invested with him. And so they know that him not having money in the game doesn't matter. What he does is he puts his expertise, his experience, and his labor into the deals to get them done. And I shouldn't say that. Ken doesn't actually work. He put his experience building systems and hiring people into the deals, and he's created the infrastructure by which other people can put their money to work, and he and they both profit from that collaboration. Now, this is often the most expensive money. Why? Well, because it's the most risk, as I mentioned. And so typically speaking, I target, and this varies with the market, of course, and also your network, but generally speaking, 16 to 20% is what you're going to need to target as a projected return. And when I say projected return, I don't mean, gee, I hope these stars align and we get to 20%. Like that should be a conservative, realistic, we're going to get this 20%. And oftentimes I personally subscribe to the under promise and over deliver. If you think you're going to offer 22%, let's call it 18 to 19. So they're really happy when they get to 22. Because psychologically speaking, if I promise 20% and give them 19%, they will be less satisfied than if I promise 16 and give them 17%. Do you get that? They're actually getting 2 percentage points less on their money, but they'd be more satisfied as long as I exceeded my projections rather than came underneath them. Does that make sense? In the middle of this spectrum here is what I would call a hybrid model. So this is basically a mix of both debt and equity, where you offer the investor a preferred return. That might be 6%, 7%, 8%. And you're going to give them an equity kicker on the back end. So it's kind of, it's the best of both worlds, middle of the road. They've got some, it's not guaranteed. There's never guarantees when you're raising money. Let me be very clear about that. There's never guarantees. There's a fixed return, which was in the debt, right? And in the hybrid model, the preferred return is also fixed. I'll give you, Ben, 7% on your money for as long as it's invested in the deal. So you give me 100 grand, you're gonna get 7 grand a year. And everybody's thinking, well, that's not enough money to get anybody excited. He's not going to do it. Well, and I'm going to give you an equity kicker, maybe 20% of the total profits. And that equity kicker plus the 7% preferred return is going to get him up into, and you see I put it there, the 12 to 16% return on your money. The reason you'll notice this hybrid model is on the screen in the middle of the two is because it's a combination of the both. The interest rate, or the amount of money we have to give our investors, is also in the middle. It's 8 to 12 in debt, 12 to 16 hybrid, and 16 to 20 in equity. Why is that? Because we've mitigated their risk by giving them a preferred return. A preferred return is not like a payment to a bank or a debt investor, because if the facility can't support it, if there's no profits, I don't have to make the payment yet. A preferred return is only payable when the company has the cash flow, the facility creates a cash flow to pay it. Now, if you can't pay it this month, you still owe it to them eventually. It accrues. It's just a way to help you in a cash flow situation because you don't have to make payments that you don't have the money for. Does that make sense?